We're going to start with a little welcome from Dean of Liberal Arts, Matthew Olson.
So this is actually one of my favorite end of the year events. I want to thank everybody for coming. There's some commercials going on. But I want to thank you all for coming out for the release of the Dead River Review. This was an idea to bring this magazine back more than 8 years ago, and I remember Professors Nardoni and Bennett sending proposals, and we had all kinds of discussions. Katie has shepherded this magazine for the last 7 years, and it's just been taken over by Tom. So there's been incredible leadership putting together what is a first-rate literary magazine. I want to thank every one of you for participating in your submissions, and I hope you all enjoy it. It's a fantastic piece that any college experience should have as part of it. So I brought the room down, I can see. So let's bring the vibe back up.
Thank you, Matthew. Before we get down to some thank yous and some other info, this is Thoreau inspired, and I want to start with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land we live, work, learn, and commune on at MCC is the original homelands of the Pennacook, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, Massachusetts communities. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. I am Tom Laughlin of the Creative Writing Program, and want to welcome everyone to the release party for issue 8 of Dead River Review. I want to thank Matthew, his support, Liberal Arts Division. I want to thank Steve Rossi of the Office of Student Engagement. He's been a wonderful supporter and helps fund things like our food, Help Yourself, all through the time. Francois DeCoster and his amazing interns making it happen in terms of videos. Beth Noel and marketing office has been great supporters. Stephan Anstey in the bookstore and other people helping us with all different things. So it's been great. I want to welcome, and I want to maybe clarify a little bit or adjust that history. And I also want to thank, this is an issue that is number 8, and it is built on an amazing history. So I'm sorry that Jonathan Bennett is not here. I thought he might be here. He was the original designer of this online literary magazine with his students, and that was a lot of work. We're plugging into that. He got started with this course and taught it for the first time, so issue 1. Daisy Carlson took over for a couple of years, and she was a wonderful teacher and got amazing issue 2 and 3, and had wonderful parties. And I'm feeling remiss because we're not dressed up as The Great Gatsby, wasn't it? Remember? Yeah, all the editors were dressed up as Gatsby 20s. All this stuff. But we're still having fun. And I wanted to also, so then Katie Durant took over for 4 years for issue 4 through 7. Yes, 4 through 7. So I want to ask you to give it up in big ways for them, and also Joe Nardoni helped bringing this all together. So thank you, everybody. Hey, Colby, grab that flower. Can you bring it over? Thank you. So little stuff, but I want to thank you, Katie. So this is for Katie, some chocolate and a flower and some nice stuff. So thank you. And Katie was amazingly helpful. Katie taught for 4 years, and she ended up with an amazing full-time job. She got in August and was really helpful, giving me all sorts of help and handing over her materials for this course and showing me how the heck to do this website and all that. So she's been great. So really can't thank you enough. Big round for Katie and all her support. for those who, I wish Jonathan was here, but he started with his students and created this name of Dead River Review. And people say, where the heck did that come from? And I just want to clarify and maybe help people to understand that Henry David Thoreau, our local boy, had a book called A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. He took a trip with his brother and wrote about that. And the Concord River, not far from here in Bedford, he stopped and camped along the way and woke up on a Sunday morning. And I want to just read a little bit where that came from. In the morning, the river and adjacent country were covered with a dense fog, through which the smoke of our fire curled up like a still subtler mist. But before we had rowed many rods, the sun arose and the fog rapidly dispersed, leaving a slight steam only to curl along the surface of the water. It was a quiet Sunday morning, with more of the auroral rosy and white than of the yellow light in it, as if it dated from earlier than the fall of man, and still preserved a heathenish integrity. But the impressions which the morning makes vanish with its dews, and not even the most persevering mortal can preserve the memory of its freshness to midday. As we passed the various islands or what were islands in the spring, rowing with our backs downstream, we gave names to them. The one on which we had camped we called Fox Island, and one fine, densely wooded island surrounded by deep water and overrun by grape vineyards, which looked like a mass of verdure and of flowers cast upon the waves, we named Grape Island. From Ball's Hill to Billerica Meeting House, the river was still twice as broad as in Concord, a deep, dark, and dead stream, flowing between gentle hills and sometimes cliffs, and well-wooded all the way. It was a long woodland lake bordered with willows. For long reaches we could see neither house nor cultivated field, nor any sign of the vicinity of man. And it goes on. But paths by near our campus, wide and shallow and sort of dead space, and that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that the city of Lowell was created in what was East Chelmsford, and they dammed rivers, and the natives who fished in fishing weirs there, their fish were not able to spawn and go upriver and died and were filling the river. So it's both the positive, peaceful of our Bedford campus, and it's also the difficult history of our Lowell campus. So that's where that Dead River Review comes from. So, thought that would help. So I want to thank all the contributors, some of whom are here. We had 28 contributors to this issue number 8, which is live now. And that's one screenshot of it. It changes. 31 poems are published in this issue. 5 creative nonfiction pieces, 3 fiction pieces, 20 visual art pieces. So let's hear it for all the contributors. Put their work forward. We have editors here, and they'll say a few things later, but I want to have an opportunity now, and I'm going to do my best. I actually messed up and didn't pull it up. I have to find the website. I just realized I didn't pull it up. But I want to maybe have those works behind, if I can make that happen, and ask people to read a piece that they have published, or a selection, whatever they want. For artwork, love to have people talk a little bit about their artwork also that's there. So I don't have a set order, but I'll sort of randomly grab some people. I don't know. What do you think? How about Cayleigh? Can you start us off? Cayleigh Baillargeon? Awesome.
What up, friends? All right, so this poem is called Dinner Time. Walter won't stop yelling about daylight savings time. Arguments about the railroad industry and commerce don't hold up well against a dog who can't read a clock and who knows our public transportation is a fucking joke and capitalism is a systematic and moral failure. Walter knows he was fed at this time yesterday and the day before that. He is tired of being gaslit. He knows it doesn't have to be like this. Walter's been to Arizona enough times to have been called queer by a cowboy in Tombstone, to piss on a Saguro and to shit on petrified wood. This is a dog of culture. He's been there in November. He knows Arizona ignores clock changes, like they ignore the needs of the reservations. Choices are being made for him, but he knows it doesn't have to be this way. The hungry don't stay hungry for long. They find a way to eat or a place to die. It's best to feed Walter before he's screaming, but he doesn't have opposable thumbs or an income. So I push dinner time back a little every day, till he gets used to the new time and the screaming stops, making space for the seasonal depression and Thanksgiving menu planning. All right, I got one more for you. This is called A Nickel for Every Nichols. It's for Tyler Nichols. They were not police officers, they were thugs, the talking head assures, distancing their actions from other officers, as if this were the first lynching available with ads on YouTube. The first grown man we have footage of being hunted while unarmed, unarmed while under siege, expected to keep calm, to comply with their kidnappers, expected to keep calm while confused, but so aware of the immediate danger, unable to defend themselves in a meaningful way, arms behind their back, unarmed and unable to help themselves, yelling for their mother, a final plea for protection. Mom, 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 a declaration of personhood, pushed forward between blows, unarmed while under siege, until the cops choose to stop, then choose to withhold any aid, choose to keep the handcuffs tight as a person slips in and out of conscious. Blood exiting the body, pooling beneath them, running down the cement, kissing the curb in the land of the free. Thank you.
Thank you, Cayleigh, starting us off. I'm not sure why my screen is not showing what's there. Tech people were here earlier, but I'm not sure why that is. But anyway, there's a PowerPoint that's still up there, and it should be showing what's on the screen. Don't you think that? I would think so. So, I think that we should hear from Katie Durant. Katie!
Thank you so much, Tom. I did teach here for 7 years in the English and the creative writing department, and I do want to say that this was my favorite class to teach, by far. There are lots of challenges and struggles with this class, many of which the students and the teacher face, but you work together as a team and you produce something that wasn't there before, and you create a community that wasn't there before. And so despite the struggles that come with teaching the course, it was my absolute favorite to teach. And I thank Tom for taking over and doing so well with it. It's really fantastic. So let's give a thank you to Tom. So I'm very happy to have someone so capable, competent, and passionate to pass it over to. I'm very happy with that. This is a piece called Hollowed Out. I'm working on a memoir now about my very dysfunctional family and why we're all estranged. And so this takes place in my childhood. It's the memoir is made out of small, short stories. Sometimes they're a paragraph long, sometimes there's one that's 25 pages long. And so this one's 2 pages long. Thought it was a good length because I could read all of it in front of you instead of cutting it off. So this is one that's kind of buried in the beginning. It's called Hollowed Out. Sometimes my mother crashed. She seemed to have left the house, but really, She buried herself in it, occupying the big bedroom, lying on the bed ensconced in a deep comforter. She went back to bed after we three left for our elementary and middle schools. Coming home, not finding her, but seeing the car outside, we called her and called louder until we heard her groggy voice drift down from the bed where she lay. These absences of hers eventually led to messes, unpaid bills, and a lack of food on the table and in the refrigerator. She was missing from the kitchen, the living room, and hallways. She retracted from us, and we tried to pull her out by bringing her breakfast in bed, cleaning without being asked, and exaggerating our own happiness, feigning excitement. We smiled and told her jokes and stories from school, and while we did have the convenience of coming and going without much interference, the house seemed empty and cold. When we came home from school, we would sometimes find her at the table crying into her arms. On these days, I would run to my room, open my closet, kneel on the floor, and reach into a hope chest under a pile of passed-down tablecloths, too pretty to use. There I had a stack of pictures I had drawn. My mother on the whale watch or camping with pink hearts and a rainbow in the clouds. Phrases like, I love you, and my mom is the best, spread across seascapes, mountains, and sky. I spent my free time fashioning these to ration them out later to my mother, who used to pull me to her knee, this time not for spanking, but for a weak hug, thanking me for being thoughtful. Mostly I received a dim thanks, and my mother would turn the page face down on the table. When she was depressed, we'd stay out until after dark. We'd come in hungry, wondering why no one had called us for dinner. At least when she was yelling, we knew we mattered. One late afternoon, I stood by her mattress on the floor, asking her to cook for us. There was no dinner. Facing the wall, the comforter clutched up around her neck, she said she didn't feel like cooking. She didn't feel like doing anything. Andy and I stood quietly with our heads down, thinking of what to say next. Not to extract a dinner from her, that meal seemed impossible and unfair, but to lift her somehow, to lighten the weight pressing down on her, the weight pressing down on us all. We thought many of her lingering spells were caused by her own behavior, and we would change the way we acted to change her. When she was down, we would put on shows for my mother. Calling her into the bedroom, I tap dance on the desk with everything I had learned in dance class, producing randomly strung together shuffles and sweeps of my arms. We would sit her in a dining room chair and we would dance ballet and break dance for her. We tied blankets around our throats and put socks on our hands and feet and took turns running full speed through the kitchen toward this shared condominium wall. Sliding on our socks and slipping on invisible banana peels, we slammed into the wall again and again, looking to see if her despair had yet turned to amusement. She would start out with her hand, head resting on her fist, slouching to the side, and as the show went on, she might slowly unfold herself until she was upright. A few more rounds, another slide across the floor, and if we were lucky, she would be laughing and clapping her hands. Her salt and pepper shaker collection clinked as the shelf shimmied. The neighbors were at the door banging, asking if we were okay. And though we knew we'd be bruised, we exulted over our mother's happiness. We knew it wouldn't last long, but for the moment, we had won against our mother's demons.
Thanks so much, Katie. Our next contributor contributed both poetry and photography. I'd like to give an opportunity to share some of that. Robert Castagna.
Thank you.
Are you going to put them up? I'm going to put something up. I'm going to try. Do you want to read poetry or you want the images? Images to start?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Good.
You can.
If I can make this happen, it's one of those that...
Okay, well, while you're doing that, I'll read a poem.
Yes.
So this first one is called Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and it's in Concord, and Thoreau is buried there on Author's Ridge. So it starts with an epigraph, a quote from Thoreau: "I never found a companion that was so companionable as solitude." That's Thoreau. So it was not Walden, but on a ridge with other authors where I found him. The roots of trees made veins in the earth, varicose and bulging, a trail of wandering musings about nature. I stood there looking at the oft-quoted lines and trampled grave sites where others had stood too long, finding communion with wilderness words and human nature. I felt an imposter, never reading the book. When I tried, I realized it was more like scripture, quote a verse and ponder. And so I lay nature aside and slowly walked away, allowing solitude his sole companion. So the pictures that were used are from Ellis Island. And so I went to Ellis Island on 3 occasions. I was doing a book on the U.S.-Mexican border, photographs of the U.S.-Mexican border. And I thought these pictures might be, a few of them might work its way into the book. They never did. But what I found was on Ellis Island are a bunch of hospitals. And they're raising money to try and get them in a better state for more people to tour them. But right now they have what's called a hard hat tour. So you get to put on the hard hat, and you get to take your camera with you, and they kind of put you through that a little tour. And then if you want to, you can request to just kind of go solo, or with maybe a couple other photographers. So I did that. So most of the pictures on the website are from in the hospitals. My grandparents came over in 1924 through Ellis Island. My grandfather had come previously a couple years before to scope things out. And then my grandfather actually did spend about a week in the hospital, because once you came over, the hospitals are right there. Once you come over, if there's anything wrong with you, they don't let you through because they don't want you to infect. Right, so he was there until he was cleared. So that's where those pictures are from. Okay, I'm going to read the next poem. I'm going to read is called "Ghost Words." This is actually about a dead river, and I didn't even associate that when I sent it in. But there you go. In Pittsfield, where I grew up, there's the Housatonic River, which was badly polluted by the General Electric. So it's called "Ghost Words." I grew up against a backdrop of dissipating smoke and chemical dirt along the riverbed. The corporation closed, making a movie set of isolated ghost towns. My mother has a similar story about a factory where her father worked, and so generation after generation, ghost worlds are created. While I sleep, ghost words come too. Poems fully formed on my lips, beginnings in words like a locomotive, they will run on paper. If I just wake up and write. At first, I'm obsessed with getting them down. Hieroglyphics, wall paintings, ancient stones, nature's reclamation, archetypes that synthesize. But now, as I try to sleep, they are left as phantom words, graffiti just out of reach in a chemical landscape. Thank you. And then I'll finish one last poem, really short one. I call it Charles Simic. He recently passed away. I read several of his books in the last several months. I got obsessed with him. My favorite being Hotel Insomniac, if you ever want to read one. So this one is called Charles Simic. So he was born 1938 and died 2023 in January. An insomniac for the living, still walking the aisles of the Athenaeum, gently pointing a finger to your old books. I thumb the pages of darkened streets where you had written, your mind holding the hand of a clairvoyant. Her cards face down on the table while I look through the neon window. And what of that pale horse that comes when we least expect it? We watch as she flips the card over, a poker face that masks its meaning. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert. Another Star alum. We have multiple alums in this issue, which is great, including Kate. So, it's wonderful. Ariadna Munoz How about Ariadna? Can we hear you?
This is Childhood Crisis at Corpus Christi. God crawls to me this way, on knees in writhing agony, imploring me to smother the misery. The nuns left me alone to shelter El Santísimo. Their virgin tones tempt me. Talk to him. He hears you. The vessel is vulnerable. He cannot be left alone. The devil is hunting him in this cathedral. And I pray, and I pray. I am 12 and I anticipate the devil's presence in the pew behind me. Am I the devil in this pew? The moon is a stark white holy Eucharist, held up to the midnight sky, casting a single soft light above the insatiable sacrament. The consecrated host is naked, feeble, pathetic. In looming silence, I hear distant hooves in the narthex, in God's deceptive whimpers. This is what Margaret of Cortona relished. I am Veronica, and my veil is a polyethylene sheet. I am 12, and tonight I am married, impregnated and swollen. I am 12, and tonight I am peccable married, in memory of university heisted girlhood. Violating canonical law, I exit the stained glass purgatory and miscarry. God as the face of a drooling dog. God as coffee ground vomit. God is inexorable consciousness. God as Holofernes, and I, Judith.
Thank you, Ari. How about Neal Ferrera? How about Neal?
Hey guys, this is going to be a lot better than the first time that I was up here. So, during the, I want to say it was during the 19th century, but for a while there was something that people might recognize as freak shows that went on just in America and also across Europe too, I think. And it was basically, if anyone is not familiar, where people were just kind of weird, and they would get tickets to basically marvel at the weirdness of these freaks. And I was really fascinated by freak shows because I learned of a person named Joseph Merrick, who is also known as the Elephant Man because he had what doctors today still don't really know what was wrong with him, but what is theorized is that he had a lot of different sicknesses that made his face look very ugly and not human. So, and he was, for a while, he was part of like a sideshow attraction, but then he was able to make his own show. And I found that it was really interesting because I liked that, or I sort of like saw it as this sort of strange story of this man who had the cards stacked against him for a very long time, but then eventually, because the people in these freak shows were often abused, they were outlawed. But unfortunately, when they were outlawed, there was a lot of people who couldn't find work anywhere else, and they often ended up dying penniless and alone. So that's where this story comes from. And the name of this story is Will of a Bleeding Attraction. So just a general trigger warning for the body horror. Arthur Brewer, our foreman, knew that we were all freaks. I was with his band for only 3 months, and I fell in love with both the money and the craft. What the craft was, I still don't know for sure. I don't even think the people who paid money to see us knew what it was. But what I did know is that my routine would change every single time, as the scales would change every single time. Sometimes the scales took over my face. Sometimes the scales were loose for author to sell without hurting me. But sometimes they closed around my throat and my eyes, constantly in fear that I would take sewn-eyed Ezekiel's place as the eyeless attraction. But what would happen to him? Arthur showed us a love the world never gave us. Ezekiel Stone was worthy of the love that his mother never gave him. We were all freaks in the freak show, but we were fantastic. And I was Nathaniel Knight, the crocodile boy. I didn't know what was weirder. My transformation, or the fact that the others in the freak show made me feel normal. There was Sally Blumore, who had a missing eye but had a tentacle instead, and Ramus White, whose fur had the same color as his name implied whenever he would transform. I somewhat envied him, but every night I'd hear him throw up, so maybe I was lucky I wasn't a shapeshifter like he was. But, like everything else, they ended. It's even worse when it's something you can't control, like the unwavering fist of law. Brewer was fined, and we all had to leave the attraction. Ramus was shot by a hunter, thinking that he'd found a dire wolf. And as I lay here, touching my bloody stomach wound, I found myself wishing so much, but most of all, to be back with them. They wanted to see if my skin was bulletproof. Thank you.
I was going to ask whether Amelia wanted to read. Is she back there? Yes. Do you want to read? Great. Amelia Rubin.
Hi, this is a poem I wrote called The Masks We Wear. My professor says having a personality is just having a mask, because we all mold and chip away at parts of ourselves. We conform to other people sat in the room, loud and thundering to match their style, or calm and collected in the wake of someone else's storms. She says we all wear masks. I think we're all made up of masks because we're never the same, never consistently happy or sad, anxious or mad. We're made up of masks because we're messy and we match to those masks around us and get the closest to being maskless depending on what kind of person surrounds us.
Amelia. Donna Tarrant. Ready to read?
I'm so embarrassed. My poem is so short.
That short is good. Short is condensed. Let's hear it for Donna Tarrant.
Well, first I want to tell you that I've been writing since I was 17, and I've had a book published, a booklet of poems published in 2019. It's called Precious Gems, and it's on Amazon. I'm working on another one called Poetic Treasures and Dreams, and I write a lot about the ocean and the sea and sunsets and things like that. I have a lot of nature poetry. This is nature. It's a cinquain poem with 2 syllables, 4 syllables, 6 syllables, 8 syllables, and then 2 syllables. It's called Turning Tides. Tide turns, waves crisscrossing, while sand is swept away, and the ocean displays sundown's red clouds.
Thank you, Donna. How about Olivia Steen? How about Olivia?
Hi everyone. So a little backstory. I wrote this for my mother. We hadn't talked for a while and then we got back in touch and she had been suffering from arthritis, so I wrote something about that for her. It's called Rheumatoid. Her fingers have started to twist. Pretty, fragile hands, breaking to rearrange in an uncomfortable order, slow torture. Cut her hair, can't brush it anymore. Starfish hands, so separate from one another, that thumb cannot be pointer finger's neighbor anymore. They have become strangers, a painful separation, vacant space in between. Cannot grasp her child's hand, nonetheless hold it. Solidifies that old age does not always contaminate the bones. It's in the blood. The genes. What can that imply if drugs justifying the means to soothe the pain of discomfort, of depression? Loosen the tension with more medicine. The devil disguised himself as a disease. Arthritis took over the hands of a lover, a mother, and one is breaking in between.
Thanks, Olivia. What a great stuff out there, huh? Wonderful. How about a little fiction from Ray Anganes? Is he here? Yeah.
All right, so this is a creative fiction, but realistic fiction. So it's called The Sunlight. So the sun was blue in the sky, just far enough away to give Juliana hope. While the storm battered against her shelter, pine branches and ferns blew with clay. Sun shone in the distance, and the light came down through the storm clouds. Her stomach had long since given up its growling, and she wished her body would stop its trembling. Any movement was a waste of energy. She sat cross-legged in the fire pit, shielding a little flame with her body and holding on to the warmth of damp coals and embers beneath her thighs. This is the last storm, she whispered to herself over and over. It's the last one. The sunlight wasn't mocking her. It didn't dare her to chase it. Daylight was coming to banish this gray darkness, and divine winds blew the clouds out into other lands. Whether the cuts, the bruises, or the cold had broken her every nerve, Juliana could hardly feel her arms or her legs. Even her broken ankle had gone numb. The thought of sunshine on her face was all that kept her eyes from closing. She hunched over the flame in her lap, letting any rain that got through her shelter break upon her back. Wind howled and cold rainwater cut at every still living nerve. How long had she survived out here? 5 weeks? 7? She stopped counting after day 25. It had been too long. No one was coming for her. No one would find her out here in the stretch of the Mahani Valley, where hikers were banned from treading. But she couldn't help herself. Couldn't help but seek out natural wonders hidden away from human eyes. Now all our dreams were of cityscapes, of houses with electric heating. She clenched her teeth together. She could survive one more. She wouldn't leave the fire to burn alone. It had stayed alive through storms and wild animal attacks alike. It had given her its burning sticks to wield as weapons, its lights to forage and scout by, and its warmth to fill her heart and sustain her flesh. But the rain and wind still raged against her. They bit like starving dogs. Juliana breathed in whatever smoke she could, cherishing every ember and warm fleck of ash that stuck to her throat and her lungs. Her mother had always said to stay away from cigarettes, but she never said a thing about fire ash. The light moved closer and the wind blew harder. Her shelter creaked and groaned as the storm clawed at it. Pine needles were stripped from its roof, and the dry clay mortar grew slippery as the rain saturated it. Even the muddy ground beneath her lean-to's foundation began to shift. If the fire survived, she knew that she would too. Its flame was small, its heat a mere shadow of its former fury, but it still burned hot enough that she dared not touch it. The searing, radiant heat was a reminder that her body was her own, that it was not just a lump of flesh to be devoured by nature. The rain subdued the hot coals into a quiet warmth, and she dug her fingers down into the ash. Her khakis were reduced to shorts now. Thorns and jagged stones made sure to slice them away. Juliana only wished she couldn't see her legs. She wished they were covered. Her thighs were nothing but raw skin and scabbed out cuts from long hours of crawling across the forest floor. But the outside of her legs were frozen, sacrificed to the rain for the rest of her body's sake. Her knees and shins had long since been buried beneath the surface of the ash-filled fire pit, their bruises hidden away from the elements. Her shelter collapsed. It dumped its water and mud on top of Juliana. She shivered hard, and her eyes would have watered had her tear ducts not frozen by now. The snow had not come yet, nor would it for some weeks. Had she an igloo, nature would not have dared to demand her life as payment for her pride. But the rolling thunder called her mortal soul. It screamed for her to submit, and she defied its rage, denied it the satisfaction of easy prey. Juliana watched the sunlight grow ever closer. The flame was even weaker now. Water drizzled down her back and across her torso, snaking its way onto the bed of coals. She scrambled to consume the dying fire's heat. She sucked in the smoke and hunched closer to the flame. It was dying. Its life had lasted the week she'd been here, and now it was dying. No, don't leave me here, ran through Juliana's mind over and over. The fire had no pride thought, no hope of weathering the storm. It had put its trust in her to protect it. I'm sorry I used you, is what she said to it. She rambled on as the fire fought to boil away the raindrops assailing it. But the battle was done and the flame went out. Juliana lay down in the ashes and screamed. The stronger forces of nature had demanded her life before. She'd reached the summit of Everest. She'd sailed in hurricanes, and she'd been lost in the Sahara. Northern Canada would not reduce her to a corpse. The light was on its way. And had her arms any strength to reach outward, she might have even felt its warmth. She owed her life to those that she lost along the way, to the dead flames and fallen branches who gave their all, their very lives to protect her from the wrath of earth itself. I won't let them die in vain. I refuse. And as her hands went cold and the ashes washed away, leaving her body without protection, Juliana felt the gentle stream of molten gold pour down upon the crown of her head. Even as the rain still pelted her back, she looked into the blue sky, into the golden sun. Two gods raged up above, and the mercy of one drove away the malevolent other. She threw her head back again, defying her fate, defying the fall that left her stranded and lost, defying every inner voice that gently told her to let go. A new thunder raged in the sky, this one born of steel and petrol rather than clouds and lightning. The pilot of the Valkyrie brought in his beast to land at a clearing, mere steps away from her camp. Fell beneath the tree line, and the thunder settled to a rumble. Light warmed Juliana's holy body now, shining down on her as she prayed it would. If only her little fire was here to celebrate this victory. If only her little shelter had withstood the wrath of rain and wind. She used all her strength to push her hands into the ash, then curled her injured fingers around a hardened coal. Men in orange jumpsuits came running out of the clearing, a stretcher borne between the four of them. Juliana held onto that coal even as they lay her down and flew her off. Ash blew into the wind, off of her skin, and was scattered across the forest as saviors carried her broken body away into the blue sky. Juliana clutched onto the coal. She clutched it tightly.
Thank you, Ray. And Ray is another of our star alums, and also an alum to Dead River Review Editing. Let's hear it for Ray, another alum. I think I got 7 or 8 alums and or former students, and got 5 faculty or staff members, and lots of current students. It's really a wonderful mix. Bridget Landers, would love to hear from you. Let's hear from Bridget.
A little backstory before I start. This poem is probably one of my most revised poems I've made. I sometimes write when I'm down and out, but this is one of those poems. It is called I Am Not Insane. We can be the calm before the storm, the lull of a final sense of security, the feeling of loneliness in a crowded room and overcrowded in the empty ones. We can be the good, the bad, and the ugly, the sad, the happy, and the beautiful, or all at once, never pick and choose. We can be heaven or we can be hell, even the in-between, the judge, the jury, the persecution, the sentence, though never be innocent or guilty. We can be either a loud cacophony or the sweetest of softest melodies, and we are never silent. Not even if you beg on your hands and knees. We are the screams you make when no one is listening. We are the silence when you want them to listen. We are you when you are smiling, even though you are in pain. We are the shadow of your victories, the reflection of your mistakes. We are neither angel nor demon, nor Jesus, God, or Satan. We are you. We are always you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, one of our editors, another of our editors. Let's hear from Lexi Perry. How about Lexi?
Hello. I have 2 poems that I'm going to share, and both of these poems have been poems that I've shared in previous classes and have had workshopped over the past year, and they both kind of correlate to the common themes that I put in a lot of my poems, which are elements of nature and elements of color. This first one is called Rain on Pavement. The gentle light in the morning and the heat reflecting off the chills clasp on to the past. The grass turns cold when the sun goes down. The creatures sing when the heads turn round. I am a different person in the moments when everybody is busy making other plans. And it's two different worlds and my feet can't touch them both. But when petrichor fills meadows, a sheer layer of both merges. Thank you. And the second one's called Shades of Purple. Flesh of the finer fruits of pomegranates, grapes, and figs, and the delicacies of lust it is in the taste. Flourished petals of lilacs, of lavender and lupine, as we blossom to spring, it is in the smell. Shadows of sunset and sunrise, your naked silhouette at midnight in the heat of the summer, we ignite in violent twilight. But just like the fate of same old stale fruits is my pale skin, full of purple bruises camouflaged in makeup reminisced through ink. In the darkness of night, you still live on my flesh, and I can't let you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Lexi. Another Star alum who works at the college. How about Stephan Anstey?
So first thing, I want to say how honored I am to actually be in this magazine. And I was in a writer's room with Katie many years ago, and I will tell you, I knew right away that she was a special writer, and it just really shows. So that's awesome. Tom's an amazing writer. If you've ever seen his book, it's awesome. Mr. Nardoni in the back is an amazing writer. It is, the people that do this magazine are special, and I'm very grateful to be here. And so I gave 3 things to this issue. One was a piece of art. And what was it? Yep. So it's that mill girl right there. That was done on my iPhone with my finger a while back. And when I look at that piece of art, I spent a year as a national park ranger, and I gave tours of the city of Lowell. And one of the big themes, one of the things we talk a lot about when you're given a tour as a national park ranger is the story of women. And I happen to have one of the greatest honors and privileges of my life. I don't know how anyone could ever beat it. I worked with my daughter for a summer. She was a national park ranger, and I was just a seasonal ranger. And I got to see her be a special woman. She would dress up as a mill girl and give these first-person interpretive tours. And so this was for my daughter. This actually, the national park, if you ever go to the national park, I did this while I worked there, and they now use it as a thing for little kids to color in when they visit the park. So that's what that little piece of art is. Tom brought up the Indians of Lowell. When you're a Middlesex student, it should be noticeable that the Concord River is super close. In fact, if you want to go into the back of the parking lot, there's a little path that goes down to a beaver pond. That beaver pond actually empties into the Concord. So you can actually connect from this campus. When you go to the Cowan Center, that right there, that's the canal coming in, goes right into the Concord River. When you're going over that little bridge between the garage, that's the same river that's just right over here. They're both connected. So it's super cool. And when you're standing in that little bridge and you look across the Concord River, you're looking at the Wamasett lands. Up until when Lowell was founded, there was an Indian tribe that lived right there. And you can think of them every time you drive through Tewksbury and you pass the bowling alley and you see Wamasett lanes. It's the same tribe. And every time you're driving down French Street or Father Morset Boulevard, you go by the Wanalancet Mills. Well, Wanalancet was the son of Passa Conway, who was the big chief of the Pennacook Indians that Tom talked about. His grandson was Kankamangas, the highway in New Hampshire. And when you go up to the Kankamangas, you come to the Pemigewasset River which is the head of the Merrimack River. So you go up there, you can see how all of this all connects together. So when I see that picture, when I drew that picture, you look at the top of that loom, that is powered by the water going past in the canal. Particularly the boot mills would be the Eastern Canal, probably. So that's what that picture is all about. And so I had written a poem to go with it. Let's see, A Woman I Imagined. So this is not a true story, it's an imagined story. As she entered the noisy, bustling factory floor of the textile mill, she already felt the exhaustion creeping up on her. After nearly a year working there, leaving her family's farm in Maine, the work was almost as hard as farm work, and the hours were nearly as long, but the exhaustion might have been even more. Like all of the other girls in the mill, she was on her feet for 12 hours a day in the deafening noise and air thick with cotton dust. She was bending over the looms and spindles, helping them churn out dozens of yards of cloth, determined to make the best of her situation. She had heard of the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association, a group of girls who worked in the mills, fighting for better treatment and working conditions. She read the Lowell Offering, which featured stories and poems written by girls like her, and had been inspired to put her own thoughts on paper. She even attended a meeting, though she was nervous. She quickly connected with so many other girls as they talked about the long hours, the low pay, and life in the boarding houses where they were housed. But whether they knew or not, she knew they were silly to imagine a society where all people were treated with respect and dignity. She knew they were silly to think a woman could be treated fairly. But oh, how she loved to imagine a world that could never be. The other piece is almost equally untrue. Hold on, let's see here. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it on the website here. Hold on. There we go. Okay. This one is about, so if you're ever in downtown Lowell, and you ever go to, any of you guys know Sizzling Kitchen? Anybody? So right near Sizzling Kitchen, it's before it, going towards town, City Hall, there's a little alleyway. It's got a little plaque and it says Comiskey Alley. Hugh Comiskey is a real guy, and he was the Irishman that was hired out of Charleston to dig the canals. Interestingly, years later, he ends up as mayor of Lowell. After the whole Irish in the Acre and all that stuff, you know the Irish have finally arrived when they got to political power after the Civil War. So, Hugh Comiskey strode confidently down the road, not far from the Middlesex Canal, leading a group of 30 strong Irishmen from Charleston. They were ready to make their mark on this new land. He had spoken to a man named Boot about a job in East Chelmsford, where some dirty-moneyed Shawnees were scheming to make mills in America, and he was determined to get a piece of that filthy lucre for himself and his men. When they arrived at Fry's Tavern on Central Street, he felt a sense of pride as he approached the door. He knew of Boot's reputation as a rich and powerful man, but he was confident in his men. County Tyrone was thick in them, and they were hard-working and strong. As they entered, he saw Boot sitting at a table surrounded by ruffled papers, books, ledgers, maps. He looked up and greeted them with a nod. "Welcome to the town of Chelmsford," he said. "I'm glad you're interested in the work we talked about." Hugh stood tall and looked Boot directly in the eye. He said, "Yes, sir, we are strong and skilled workers, and we're eager to make our mark on this town." Boot nodded, impressed by Hugh's confidence. "I can appreciate that. We have plenty of work to be done here, and I need able-bodied men. Can you start tomorrow? I'll get you some tools and a bit of food, and we'll see how you do." Hugh smiled. "Well, there's the small detail of money." "Oh, I'm sure that won't be a problem," Boot replied. 75 cents a day seems a fair wage." $1, the Irishman's smile turned gold. Unaccustomed to being contradicted, Boot paused. "I can't pay a penny more than 84 cents. Take it or leave it." Comiskey's hand went out. Boot looked at it, and it was agreed. The next morning, they arrived at the Pawtucket Canal, little more than a ditch. "Boys, Boot wants this 3 times as deep and twice as wide." As one of Boot's men handed out the tools and supplies, Comiskey fixed his hat, slapped his hands together. Work hard, boys. Work hard, and we're going to own this town. And the last thing I'll say about that is every time you're on Central Street and you see the Bank of America ATM, that's where Fry's Tavern was. That's where it all started. All the city of Lowell starts at that Bank of America ATM. So there you go.
So wonderful to hear the backstories here today and sense of history, personal and geographic history. So it's wonderful. Our next reader, Tariq Brathwaite. Tariq.
Hello.
Hi there.
I honestly really don't know what to say first of all, because I never would have seen myself like joining an amazing team to do this editing work and being contributed with the Dead River. Never would have imagined it, and then honestly, it was probably one of the best times I had here, honestly. So, and I also got my first published like poetry in here too, so that's pretty cool too. Okay, so it's called The Old Skelly. What is this old thing laying on my front desk as if it was a king on a throne? It's not a crown nor a snapback. Placing my hands on its visor, the visor felt like cardboard, but its skin felt soft as if I was spreading my blanket across my bed. The cap was drained of its color. However, it holds a blue stitch, the kind of stitch that patched up its wound, raising the cap over my head, placing the crown where it should. Feeling like a king to my own fashion makes me feel old yet wise. The history this cap holds is old. Damn, I love this great cap. Thank you.
Thanks, Tariq. And let's hear a little fiction from Jared Waugh. Jared.
I'm just pulling up it on my own screen myself, but you guys have that big screen behind you. And echo some sentiments that have been said already. I consider myself very lucky to have been a part of the creative writing and publishing class of Dead River Review this year for a multitude of reasons. It's a great magazine. Professor Laughlin is a great professor, and I had a great class and good editing team. Feelings mutual, Neal. Yeah, wait, no, I loved working with you guys too. You rock. This story is called When the Buildings Vanished. Gordon wished that he had been awake when the buildings disappeared. At least, he wished that he had been doing something to document it. Taking a photo with his phone, a video, anything. All those Instagram live videos that his younger sister was always doing didn't seem as stupid to him at that moment. But he had managed to document anything. There hadn't been time. One minute he had been walking down the street they had grown up on. Driving back from a family reunion, he was passing by his old neighborhood, and he had decided to get out and walk around on a whim. And the next moment he was lying down the sidewalk. He could not remember how long he was out for. It was a cloudless day, and the sun's position in the clear blue sky looked unchanged. So he assumed that not much time had passed. He remembered that he had heard a low buzzing sound while he was walking, and at first concluded that it was just cicada. The buzzing had grown in intensity over the course of a few seconds, however, and Gordon could remember looking all around him for its source, but could find none. And then he remembered feeling like the sound was coming from the space between his ears, and how bad it had hurt, and how he couldn't see and needing to find shelter from the pain and the sound and the buzzing. But how could he? It was coming from everywhere. And he remembered nothing after that. He assumed that was when he had blacked out. then and there, in the street. As he slowly stood up and began to gather himself, Gordon was relieved to find that the blinding pain from before was gone. He was less relieved to find that the buildings were gone too. Gordon was not a few yards away from where he parked his truck at the end of the street where he had grown up. So he knew that on his left there should have been the corner store where he and his mother had gone to buy the basic necessities. One of his earliest memories was that walk across the street and around the corner, holding his mother's hand, though he could only remember looking directly at the road in front of him. But instead there was just nothing to suggest that the corner store had ever been there, except for a six-sided outline where the building sat, light gray concrete contrasting the black asphalt surrounding it. No plumbing or wires of any kind sticking out either. It was like a giant hand had come, plucked the corner store up, and then smoothed out the ground beneath to hide any evidence that something had been taken, that anything had ever even been there. Gordon also knew that on his right, across the street, should have been the house that he had grown up in. For the first time, he turned his head and braved a look across the street. Where the asphalt driveway had once led to a one-story brick house and garage, it now led to a patch of brown, dried-up grass occupying the space where the house once sat. It was like his childhood home was a tent that had been pulled away after a few hours at a country fair, its negative effect on the lawn the only indication that something had once been there. Gordon began to walk across the street toward his old yard, not bothering to look for cars before he did so. God, are there even still cars? He thought to himself as he looked straight ahead. Of course there are still cars, he responded to his own question. Your truck is right there at the end of the roundabout. You were just looking at it. Oh yeah, Gordon thought back to himself. And even if there weren't any other cars around, we don't know that for certain. We're dealing with the missing houses right now. Right, he responded. One thing at a time, or you'll drive yourself mental. Gordon snorted. More mental than I am already? He gave himself no reply. The pressure beneath his feet changed from hard asphalt to firm dirt and grass, and he found himself standing in his childhood yard. Gordon looked straight ahead through the space where his childhood home had once stood to the backyard. He realized that he had more fond memories of playing in the backyard than he did in the front yard. Makes sense, he thought to himself, as his parents were more responsible than to let a 4-year-old play in an area not 10 feet from the road. He noticed that whoever was living there now had started what looked like a nice vegetable garden in the backyard. He could see big red tomatoes growing from the vines wrapped around a large, unweathered wooden stake. Gordon had never gotten to know the new homeowners. How could he? He was only 5 years old when his family moved, and they had moved nearly an hour and a half away. Outside of nostalgia and visiting local relatives, Gordon never really had much reason to come back. He hoped that they were well, regardless. He hoped that they had been at home when it disappeared. He briefly wondered if he should hope that they were home when this happened. Would that have been a good thing? Who even knew? Who even knew what was going on? Gordon realized that he felt very stiff. He took a deep breath, shrugged his shoulders, and simultaneously exhaled and let his shoulders down. It helped. Something, at least, he thought. Gordon then slowly walked over to the space housing the dying grass. He stopped suddenly with the tip of his shoe just resting outside the outline. Gordon quickly threw his hands up and began feeling out the space where the walls of the building should have been, seeing if he could make contact with anything solid. Nothing. Satisfied, Gordon brought his hands back down, lifted a foot, and took a step into the outline. Dry grass crunching beneath his foot. He walked straight ahead, kept looking straight ahead, until he reached the center of the house. Not taking his eyes off of the vegetable garden beyond, Gordon sank to his knees and kneeled. He didn't look away from the garden. If he didn't look beyond the garden, or the thick woods behind it, he wouldn't have to turn around to see the rest of the damage. He wouldn't have to think about the potential of any other missing cars, or buildings, or plants, or even people. He wouldn't have to see if the giant blue spruce tree across from the corner store was still there, or the gas station that had stood in front of it. He wouldn't have to worry about his family, his mom, dad, sister, aunt, people he had only seen a few hours ago, possibly disappearing, or if he would ever see them again. He wouldn't have to consider the possibility that this would be the last time something like this happened. Gordon remembered that he had read somewhere that the human body, on a molecular level, generated different kinds of tears for different emotions. Tears of joy, grief, distress, they were literally all different by design. Gordon didn't want to think that he was crying out of sadness based on what was happening right now. It didn't feel like the right time for it. So when he felt his eyes welling up and his cheeks becoming wet, he justified it by telling himself it was just stress. He repeated to himself, "These aren't tears of grief. There's nothing to grieve over. It's just a measured response to stress. Can't get any worse, at least." It was a phrase that Gordon was familiar with in general, not that he believed it right at that moment.
Thanks, Jared.
Tom, I have to leave. I'm afraid I might.
Sure,
shuttle,
you
so
catch your bus.
everybody.
Thank you.
I enjoyed them. Thank you.
MacKenzie Taylor. Let's hear some poetry from MacKenzie.
Hi. So, funny thing about this poem is I did not intend for it to end up being a poem, to be published, anything like that. I was simply just writing it after a couple months of getting over something with somebody, and it was kind of just like a mindless writing moment. So it's called A Healing Poem I wrote in the library months later. I am trying to heal. I mean, I'm still existing when I don't want to be. I wrote a letter to you and burned it. I changed my coffee order to be less bitter. I called my mom to tell her I loved her. I threw away the letter you left on my dashboard. I cut my hair and watched the sunset. I never stopped listening to the music we sang together in my Mercury. I added those songs to my Reminds Me of People playlist. I still cry over it all sometimes, but it's not about you, really. I still have your contact in my phone. I've never reached out since you told me I deserved better, and I probably never will. I cleaned my windows. I didn't care about the streaks. I realized I don't really miss you. I don't want to be with you, but I don't want to be with anyone else. I go to the bookstore alone with headphones in. I listen to loud music. I laugh about your cat's names. I take my sleep medication. I hold my little brother tight. I close my eyes and see myself before you were ever a part of me, before the nights on my bedroom floor, before the sand fell out of my hourglass, before I became loose change. I'm not mad. I never was. I'm trying to heal, and I'm doing a damn good job. Other poem I wrote after a pretty morbid conversation with my older sister. We were talking about decisions we want made. God forbid something happens to one of us. And I went on a whole rant about how I don't want to be like buried, like I want to be cremated. I'm creeped out by the thought of being in a grave. So I wrote this poem in response to that conversation. Let me sleep without bug bites. When time takes its toll, when I'm finally permitted to exhale and never inhale again, send this tired flesh to save another. Take whatever is left of my body and set it up in flames. I've been burning for years. Let this bonfire finally be the last. Do what you need with the ashes, but I beg of you, don't bury me to be a corpse, crawled on and eaten away by insects. My body did that enough when it had a pulse.
MacKenzie. Claudio Sanchez. Let's hear a poem from Claudio.
Hello. I'm here.
Right.
I'm not used to hearing my own voice when it comes to my poetry. I'm more of a write it and let other people read it kind of person. So This is weird for me. This doesn't really need much of an introduction. It's kind of self-explanatory. But I did write this like years ago. I went to the Dali Museum and then I fell asleep right after. So that's it. I, head of cloud, mind thunders, distractions abstract, curious sounds within and new clears to be had. Landscapes blurred where, colors melt between cells, all contents of consciousness fall, dripping on stucco and tile. Distinctness leaving the home, lines resigning now, form need not apply, logic left no impression on this portrait, artist mad with rain, dream comes tempest and paint, over-awareness, dry senses now wet with, faults in perception, a typhoon surreal to wash away, an afternoon on a wave.
Thank you, Claudio. Jim Grenier. Let's hear it from Jim.
I'm almost wondering what picture you found, Tom.
I didn't find my editors found it.
Okay, I'm sure it was really good.
Good to see you.
I'm just going to read the story as it is, but I would like to dedicate it to my life partner, Wendy, who is also here. And we met 30 years ago here in Middlesex.
Wow.
So, this story is called Too Hot for Pants. Vern sat on the couch. Vern, get dressed. We're going to be late, Vera said. I am dressed, he said. Vera sighed. She did this when she was exasperated, mainly at her husband, which was often. You can't go to your father's funeral in shorts. Why not? What do you mean, why not? It's a funeral. It's just not done. Put on some pants, we have to go. It's too hot for pants. Vera sighed again and walked out. If Vern wanted to look like he didn't care, that was his problem. Vern chuckled. He did that whenever he annoyed Vera enough to get her to leave him alone, which was often. 10 minutes later, they were in the Chevy. Vera was wearing her Sunday best, including a wide-brimmed hat with a bird on it. Vern was wearing a white button-down shirt, black tie, navy sport coat, and golf shorts over sandals. And off they went. Vern shifted into third as they got into the two-lane interstate. The truck was silent other than the hum of the motor and the shifting of gears. It had a manual transmission, which Vern liked. Operating a manual was really driving instead of just going along for a ride, which is how he felt like when he drove an automatic. Vern's mind began to wander as it often did when he drove. Thought about his father, who had wanted him to take over the family auto parts business instead of going to college. Vern chafed at the memory. He had gone anyway. He graduated from Wentworth with a degree in civil engineering in 1971, after which he pointedly avoided going home and instead enrolled in the Army Corps of Engineers. At the time, the Army was winding down one war and not quite ready to start the next, so he spent much of his service reworking plans for barracks and assisting with various civilian projects. Temporary dams were his favorite task, and he earned a reputation for being good at them. The first Gulf War broke out a year before he was eligible for retirement. The so-called 100-day war was won largely through air power. It seemed as if it were almost over before it had begun. Victory was declared by all the right people. The embedded journalists went back to their AP feeds in air-conditioned Manhattan high-rises, but the oil fields burned pillars of smoke by day and fire by night as the West led its own exodus from the scorched desert. Vern's unit was shipped out at the time. He spent the rest of the war involved with the rebuild and refit of the Kuwaiti oil rigs. It was boring work and he didn't like the sand or the heat. He did get to see Euphrates River and assisted with the construction of a temporary pontoon bridge. His suggestion for using the bridge to help direct water to the local village was rejected. In April of 1992, Vern became eligible for retirement. Having won both sick of the heat and Uncle Sam's Army, he filed the paperwork the very next day. Vern, slow down! Vera's voice drifted through the sands of memory and into his consciousness. Hey, slow down, the speed limit's 40.
He chuckled. He checked. Somewhere along the way, it shifted into the 5th gear and was doing 52 miles an hour. Betsy, as he called his truck, liked that sweet spot to shift into the higher gear. If he shifted before that, say 48 or 50 miles an hour, the truck would nag him until he shifted back to 4th, gained speed, and then up to the higher gear. And that was just Betsy. Logically, as a machine, she was easier to deal with than Vera. Machines had rules, and humans didn't. At least none Vern could fathom. Certainly there were no operator's manual for dealing with people, and that was enough right there. He had remarked this to Vera several times, to which she would only sigh. The memorial service was brief, the little out-of-the-way chapel pleasant enough, though too hot. Vern's brother Phil said a few words. The minister said more. As his father had been cremated, there was no trip to the cemetery. There was, however, a light lunch in the outback under a weathered but serviceable standing tent top. Vern drank sour lemonade, listened to the condolences of friends and cousins he hadn't seen in years, excuse me, and redesigned the tent top's pulley system in his head. No one said anything about his shorts. Later that evening, a fast-moving thunderstorm moved up the coast of Maine. It swung inland over their place before blowing out to the sea. The air around the house dropped 12 degrees in 12 minutes. Vern sat in the rocking bench on the front porch the whole time. The cool air was damp and had a slight salt taste that reminded him of the once semi-regular trips to Bar Harbor that he and Vera had done, even after all those years. It had been a long time since they'd driven down the coast. Vern wondered why. At 9:17 p.m., Vera came out with 2 tall glasses of lemonade, which she handed one to Vern and sat next to him. "Thank you," he said. He scratched his calf where the black fly had bitten him. "It doesn't look good," Vera said. "My own fault," said Vern. "It's too hot for pants. Anyway, I'll live." "Well, I hope so." Vern sipped the lemonade. It was cold and delicious. "I don't see why," he said. "I'm a jerk." "No, you're not. You're hurting." "No excuse. My dad was a jerk. I'm just like him." Vera touched Vern's hand the way they had when they were young. He noticed the varicose veins on the back of both their hands. Hers were beautiful, like the slender lines of a long river in the desert. His just looked like knotty bulges. "I'm old, I'm ugly, and I'm a jerk," he said. "I told you you're not a jerk." "Okay, old and ugly it is." "Oh, stop," she said. "You and Stanley had a complicated relationship." To this, Vern snorted. To say the least. He loved you. He had a funny way of showing it. He didn't know how. Vern grunted. "And neither did you. Doesn't mean you didn't love him or miss him. You just have to take some time to sort it all out." "I don't know how to do that either," Vern admitted. "That's because there's no operator's manual for this," Vera said. They sat together for a while, holding hands. The crickets sang out the notes of their final summer song. And far off over the sea, the storm rumbled out the last of its fury in long, winding echoes.
So, did I miss any one contributor who wants to say? I'm just trying to think. I think we got everybody here. Let's hear it for all the contributors that are here and also all that are not here. Who may see this on video today. So glad. And I want to have my team, a couple people from my team, say a few things. I just want to say it was just such an honor to teach this creative writing and publishing course. I had an amazing team of editors who worked in 3 teams and then came together as a full committee. They worked collaboratively, communicating with others, editing, selecting images, publishing to the Dead River website, and it just was amazing, and I really enjoyed this crew. And it's been really wonderful to work as part of that crew. So I'm forgetting who agreed to say a few things, but I'd love to hear some editors saying a few words. What do you think? Who's up? Lexi, sure. Please.
First of all, I'd like to thank my group, Kenzie and Bridget. We had a large amount of poetry submissions in such a short amount of time, and we handled it equally in amount with to each a submission and each poet with equal amount of tender love and care. I want to thank the other editorial groups and Professor Laughlin for their extra set of eyes in terms of the rigorous editing process, and also everyone else in the group offering their extra set of hands when the workload got heavy. And lastly, I'd like to thank everybody who submitted and all the contributors. I think the biggest takeaway from this entire experience has been reintroducing to us how dynamic poetry is. We had short form poems, we had long prose poems, we had experimental poems and unique free verse in terms of structure. We had various subject matters from dark undertones to history to ekphrastic. We had so many different subject matters, some real life experiences that people were brave enough to put on paper, but also poems about historical experiences. And I just hope that seeing all of this now as a collection influences the people who submitted, but also us as readers to continue doing what we do. And I hope it inspires people to continue writing poems, fictions, do their art, and maybe, realizing how dynamic poetry is as a craft. Thank you.
Great. Others, editors. Jared, please. Let's hear it from Jared Waugh.
Jared, I'm coming with you.
Oh, thanks, Neal.
You didn't share the mic. So it doesn't serve anyone. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I want to thank the professor for putting up with a lot that came with like Lexi said, the tumultuous editing process, as well as the countless different types of submissions that we got and read, and I just really love the amount of, I don't want to say, I don't know, maybe Jared can find a better way to put it, but I just loved the amount of variety, I guess, that we got, and also just how each of us took what we did in, like their own we all worked collectively, and that's because group projects has always been something that I've always loathed, but this made me like them a lot more.
Well said, Neal. No, there were about 10 people in the class total, counting the professor, and he definitely was a great mentor and queued up all of the works for the magazine at the end of it, which was fantastic. But throughout, I worked most closely with Neal and Colby. We handled fiction, but it was really just nice working with the whole class when those times came around. So it was great working with all you guys, seeing you work. And to the poetry group especially, we talked about how you guys got hammered with submissions. So, especially you, kudos to powering through that. But, and to build off of what Neal said, it did make me think about the work a bit more. We had fiction, and there's different genres, but it made me, I guess the best way to put it would be that fiction is not so much genre as it is presentation. There are different genres, but there's also creative nonfiction and regular fiction, just what can be told in that format. And based on the submissions we had, it showed me just how wide that range can be, which was very nice to see and discover. And it was great working with you, Neal, and with Colby. And you guys picked up the slack for me when I had technical issues or was dealing with a major project deadline for another class, it was just great working with you guys overall. So thank you for that.
Any other editors want to speak from our other group? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Tariq!
Tariq.
I don't know how to compete with that, but I mean, with group 3, I mean, we were looking at art pieces, and to be honest, it's so hard to judge it because art can be interpreted with all different types of ways, and I was like, dang, but we got Claudio, over there, he was kind of leading the team when he was trying to let's really dig and dive in deep, and Olivia would bring that positivity, or there's still the elements of potential in it. So I always love the fact that knowing, even if they did not get, you didn't get your work submitted, keep going. And, I learned that from Tom, keep 50 tries over, just keep on going. You got people who already got published, and that's inspiration enough for me. And I mean, this is an old classroom for me. I mean, this was like family. That's my weakness. I give out so much, and I'm like, if I walk on the street, I'm like, that's not like no person. That's family right there, and I'm willing to be with them. So, I love you guys. Thank you, Tom, for being a great mentor, guiding me in that path. I feel like you too teach me that ways of getting into poetry, and I love it. I love poetry, and I hope they keep at it with it. Yeah.
I'd like all of our editors who are here. Colby had to leave, but our editors to stand up if you could. Lexi Perry, Bridget Landers, Jared Waugh, Olivia Steen, Neal Ferrera, MacKenzie Taylor, Tariq Brathwaite, Claudio Sanchez. Thank you, everyone, all the contributors, and it's just wonderful to celebrate such great quality. I just feel very proud of this issue of Dead River Review. So thanks, and enjoy yourself, chat with the editors, have some more food, please. There's lots there. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you.